Welcome to Storyhub, a podcast for customer-obsessed D2C leaders. The heroes of your brand story are your customers. Your best customers stay longer and spend more, driving growth as they love your products, brand, and their experience. On the podcast, we'll be talking to D2C leaders, innovative tech companies, and thought leaders from retail and hospitality about their observations, inspirations, and the simple hacks of crafting the experiences that keep customers coming back. Welcome to Storyhub.
It's on us as the vendor to ensure that the customer is getting value.
Yes, it's the same stuff, but in the end, it's not the stuff, it's their relationship with it.
Which makes our sales process harder and more expensive to overcome those things.
We were lifting our per customer revenue by 20 or 30% annually.
We're sitting on a gold mine with our existing customers.
So much of e-commerce optimization is really, it's more like optimizing your Tinder profile. Welcome to the Storyhub podcast. So, when thinking about customer lifetime value, LTV, it's only realized if the customer stays. And so as a pioneer in software as a service, we discovered this the hard way as we watched churn eat away at our revenue and had to figure out how to create something that hadn't existed in software companies before, this thing that we now know as customer success. So today's guest, Lincoln Murphy of 16 Ventures, was a pioneer in customer success. Him and I met on the speaking circuit around software as a service in the very earliest days of that, and have been watching him mature his thinking. Ultimately, was at Gainsight, and really was there for the maturation of this customer success market. I think there's a corollary between the thinking and customer success, how to really make customers successful systematically, to how to make customers loyal and retain them systematically. I think there's a corollary there. And so I wanted to have this conversation. So with that, thanks for joining us on the podcast today, Lincoln. And so I was thinking about where our paths first crossed, because we were SaaS pioneers, and therefore on the version 0.08 of the SaaS Roadshow. And I think we ran into each other at a conference in Dallas, if I recall.
Yeah, I was trying to think exactly when that was and where it all happened so long ago. But yeah, at some point in the very early days of it, I don't even know if we were calling it SaaS yet. If that was a term.
Yeah.
We're talking about those days, long time ago. So it's been a while.
Yeah, I remember the having to explain multi-tenant architecture. It was it's like, how do you do this? And because it was the days where people were just taking whatever app and sticking another 1U server in a rack and calling it SaaS. Wow. It was those were crazy. Yeah, and using Citrix to push Windows apps out over the internet, over a very unstable, spotty internet.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. You're right. I forgot. I actually had blocked out of my mind the whole discussion about multi-tenant architecture, and it's just so just that we don't even have to talk about that anymore. But we were literally having to educate people on what this thing was. We had application service providers, ASPs. Yes. Wow, it's all coming back to me. Interesting.
No, it was a very early on. That was I had started what would become Perimeter, now Silver Sky, as a company called Cybernostic. And we were very early on. 1997 was when we started that. So we had Andreessen, or not Andreessen, Benioff and Salesforce.com beat by a couple of years. So we were very early on and the lesson. So one of the reasons that I'm so excited to have you on is that we together on our different paths in SaaS sort of went through this learning curve about the differences in SaaS, and one of the big differences was that in the old legacy world that we were displacing, there was so much effort put in before anyone got to see anything on a screen, it was RFPs, and it was deciding the software, and it was buying servers and making sure people had the database training, and it was all of the stuff. So to my mind, like, everyone was so pregnant by the time the project started that everyone was stuck. There was hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars spent. No one was walking away. Where the very different world of SaaS, where it's like, oh, sign up for a seat, give it a try, and therefore there's just this really an amazingly revolutionary change in sort of how to get started. But it's also that radically decreased investment meant that the state of perseverance to preserve to the point of success wasn't there, and we had no sort of guide as to how to do this.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting just to kind of take that idea of persevering all the way through success is that actually, if you go back and you look at like a lot of the projects that went through that process that you're talking about, that really heavy procurement process and change management planning, how many of those didn't actually ever even come to fruition, or weren't ever deemed successful? Right. So
70% of all ERP projects were abandoned before they got there.
Right. Yeah. So even there, it's like, even in these legacy models where people spent a lot of money and time and resources and everything that goes along with that up front, they were still not getting success. And a lot of times things were so slow that by the time they got to a point where they were starting to implement things, whatever they had put in place, or whatever they had wanted to put in place, was already outdated. So it's just an interesting, just a side note on that. Like, even back then, the things that required all of that upfront investment still didn't yield the kind of results people wanted and needed. Yeah. But there was that lock-in, either contractually or technically, or both. You'd done all this work and you really couldn't make those changes. And so, yeah, a big disruption to that. And Salesforce was one of the early big disruptors of this, right. but obviously there were other players that had come along before that. The big disruptor was, gosh, I can just go to this website, sign up for this software, give it a try. A couple of people, we used to call it bandit apps. Yeah. Things that didn't go through the procurement process that people would sort of bring in through the side door. Yeah. And all of a sudden that started to be, the preferred way by a lot of people to at least try things. Well, now we could try things, right? You could actually try it. Right. And that became the path. And this is what, I have this term that I use called appropriate experience. And it just, it's just basically to say that customers have an appropriate experience across the different life cycle stages that will allow them to say, yes, this is successful. Like, I'm achieving my goal, but I'm also doing so in the way that I would like to, right? This matches my appropriate experience. And I think what we saw there was a big shift from what was an appropriate buying experience, was this really big, heavy contract based, what we would totally legacy enterprise deal, to being able to just go online and either enter a credit card or just try it for free and enter your credit card when you decide to buy. Like, that major shift in buying experience, became the appropriate experience for at least a large swath of customers. Obviously, people still buy in an enterprise way. That's the other thing, even with SaaS, like, it came back around to to big enterprise deals, multi-year contracts and things, but the time to value really, right. No matter what the procurement process looks like, the time to value with SaaS just was cut, just down to nothing. Like, you could start getting value very quickly.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because all the tech risk was gone, right? It was just that the tech risk was gone. How is this going to fit into my IT team's day? Right. Like, all of these things that could undermine it before were gone. And I think as one of the challenges was that as software vendors, we kind of saw that as the whole problem, because a lot of times consultants were involved on the sticky bits post getting the thing running. It moved off to third party organizations, as we took our licensing revenue and headed for the woods, and all of a sudden that problem was our problem, because now so there are these handful of different transfer points that I think we all needed to live and learn through, because in the early days you're like, well, I made this software, it's running right now, their instance is up, like, go, and it's like, well,
no, it doesn't work that way.
There's this thing.
Yeah. And to your point, like if you don't have a multi-year contract, you're month to month, or even if you're on an annual, time flies. So if you're just on a 1-year contract with somebody, and you've sort of left it up to them to be successful, where in the past you would have had more of a consultative approach, or they would have had a third party helping them, and it comes time for renewal. And even with SaaS and this ability to in theory get value quickly, if they didn't, they could just leave, because the overall investment and the lock-in and stuff is not there. Now, the heavier the product, the more integrations there are, just whatever. SaaS, yes, you can in theory leave easier, but it's not always super easy. But I always say, don't discount spite as a driver of business decisions. So people will rip systems out if they're not getting value. But it's been an interesting shift, and it's been a long time now, 20 years or so, that we've seen this happen. But in that time, obviously, there's been a ton of changes and evolution. But it's been interesting to watch, and I think the overall idea is, okay, where we're at today is in the way that this stuff is implemented, obviously is going to differ from company to company. Everybody has different ideas, but the overall idea is it's on us as the vendor to ensure that the customer is getting value. Again, how people go about doing that is different. The philosophies there are different, but I think it's pretty universal. It's like, okay, we really do need to have something in place that ensures our customers are going to get value from this thing, because if they don't, they'll leave. And also today, not only will they leave, but if they had a bad experience, they're gonna spread that word, which makes our sales process harder and more expensive to overcome those things. So you have that whole cycle, and so it's really important that you make sure your customers get value. Or, as I say, the other sort of secret goal is if they aren't successful, if they don't get value, we just need to make sure they don't blame us, that they need to take ownership of that failure, because we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can.
The idea of account management gave way to we had support, we had account management, there was this hybrid, who's got the ball, and we saw the invention, and really what inspired me to reach out is of customer success.
Sure.
As a thing, like when we started our first companies, that didn't exist as a thing.
No,
it wasn't a notion. So what was? Tell us about how your experience as that sort of came into focus and reality.
Yeah. Well, as I was sort of navigating this whole world of SaaS, and as honestly as the discussions about multi-tenancy and sort of the fundamental architecture of SaaS kind of died down, those became a little bit more well accepted and understood. Then I just sort of shifted to growth. Like, okay, so how can we grow more efficiently as a SaaS company? And I don't really know where this came from, but I started looking at our customer base, and this idea, because of the single tenant, or because everybody's using the same product essentially, right? Single tenant, the network effects there, all of these things. It's like, gosh, it seems like we're sitting on a gold mine with our existing customers, and nobody's really doing much with that. It's all about new customer acquisition. sales driven. And that's fine. I mean, that you have to have that. We have to get new customers coming in, but gosh, what could we do with our existing customers? And I realized that, well, we could sell them stuff, what we call land and expand now, figure out different ways of getting sort of deeper and deeper into their business, bringing more people from their team into the product and that kind of stuff. And you can do that a little bit easier with a SaaS product. And there's obviously tactics that you can use, but you just have to think about, that you have to go in with that mindset. Like we're going to come in maybe with a smaller deal size, and then we can grow over time. Well, in order to do that though, it turns out you can't really sell people more stuff if they're not getting value.
Right.
So then it's like, okay, well, what does value mean? Mm-hmm. So then we go back to that fundamental question, because value has always been something, people say you want to sell, or you want to make sure you deliver, but it's like, well, what does that actually mean? So then we started, kind of talking about that in more concrete terms, and this idea of not just ROI, not just a return on their investment, which is what a lot of legacy sort of enterprise deals were based around, but truly, what are we doing here? Well, we're trying to help our customers achieve their goals. Okay, so we need to understand that and basically set them up for success from a use case standpoint, really kind of drive them in the right direction. But so that little mindset shift of, in order to sell our customers more stuff, they have to be getting value, they have to be successful. That was the thing that was the spark for me. And I started going down that path, and it turned out there was this, I ran into this term out there called customer success. And I think it might have even been lowercase customer success. It wasn't like this big movement or anything. It certainly wasn't a business function at that point. It was just people talking about this. And I thought, that's it. That's what we're looking for. Really, it's about the customer's success. And that's what success is going to differ from customer to customer, or cohort of customer to cohort. It's going to be different for your unique relationship with your customers, but customers have a definition of success. And if we can help them meet that, then they will probably evolve. And as they evolve and grow, our relationship with them should evolve and grow as well. So you have this just organic doesn't mean not steered, right? But you have this organic ascension path that our customers could be on. So you get into this growth mode, really based around their success. And so I just gravitated that term. This was probably 2011. And around that time, before that, to your point about account management and support, the only things that we were doing in really any software company or SaaS at that time was we had a support function, technical support, like if you have an issue, break fix type of situation. Right. And that's still absolutely required and valid. And we're not saying that that's not what you should have. But in terms of sort of working with the customers in any strategic way, that wasn't there. Any way of like really focusing on their success or their goals, that wasn't there, except maybe in this function of account management, which was really just some people, maybe people in sales,
inside sales, yeah.
Right. And it was sort of, let's check in with our customers, make sure they're going to renew, see if they want to buy some other, some more seats or an add-on, right. Answer any big questions that they have. And that's kind of it. Like there wasn't much more to it. And when we started trying to figure out how to operationalize this idea of customer success, a lot of things came over from support, a lot of things came over from account management, and you realize, okay, yeah, we can. So we have like some quarterly business reviews with our customers, and well, some check-in calls, but then you start realizing that that's not enough. That's really just account management renamed. So then we started getting into this idea of, well, we're starting to know what success means for our customers. We have their goal. We can sort of reverse engineer the process that they need to take to get there. So let's put the resources in there, systems, people, processes, whatever, to meet them where they are when they get started, to get them on board, to get them up and running, and then to take them through whatever steps they need to do to be successful. Well, to do that, we're going to need resources. We're going to need people. And this is where you started having customer success managers. And, then we had to figure out, well, okay, so account managers could really have just this really sort of generic book of business, which was, here's your accounts, and you check in with them occasionally. Well, we tried to apply that to customer success, but it turns out when you're actually having to put in work to make the customer successful, to do certain things with them, this idea of, well, you can manage this much revenue, $2 million per CSM, or you can have, each CSM should have 100 customers, or, generic blanket statements like that doesn't really work. And so now where we are, 11, 12 years into customer success management, we've evolved to the point where we do really sort of extensive capacity planning across the different life cycle stages, what I call the discrete life cycle stages, like onboarding. How many person hours is it going to take to get a customer, to get this type of customer up and running? How many person hours will it take to get this other type of customer up and running? And then, how many person hours at every stage of the life cycle, so that we can really know how many CSMs we need based on how many customers we have, how many CSMs do we need to hire based on our sales pipeline, how many onboarding people do we need based on that sales pipeline, and how many onboarding people do we need based on our upsell pipeline, because we're going to have to onboard the, so it's a very sophisticated way of looking at customer success now. But so that's been the evolution. And now customer success management is a very I would say scientific, process-driven, data-driven discipline.
Yeah, the gain sites, the pendos,
exactly.
It is evolved into it. Yeah, no, because what you're talking about is exactly, what we lived through the cybersecurity company, where we had what we called a quarterly security briefing, QSR, quarterly security review, and with a consultant type, and because we were dealing with banks and security, and we had a whole array of services to sell them, we'd get together, we would review their data that they were supposed to turn into the regulators, and we would talk about new threats, and because the new threats, and then what they're trying to achieve, and what is reasonable, and what is best practices, and all those things. So we had all of that context, and what we realized is as we invested in that context, we were lifting our per customer revenue by 20 or 30% annually.
Mm-hmm.
And it was crazy.
Yeah.
Because the security was a gift that kept giving.
Yeah.
But what was interesting too is that you saw how different, in our case, different size organizations, or depending upon who their regulators were, they and what products and services they offered, and therefore what ramifications that had. It ended up that there were probably 3 or 4 different relationships, if you will, that made success for different groups. And so it was like learning to pattern that yes, it's the same stuff, but in the end, it's not the stuff, it's their relationship with it. Yes. That is the difference.
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, that's what I look, every customer thinks that they're unique. And so I always say, the closer you can get to talking about the customer, tailoring things to that uniqueness, the better you're going to be. Now, of course, from a scalability standpoint, we can't always get, we can't tailor everything, but I take the onboarding process as an example. I call onboarding the functional trough of sadness, because think about, like during the sales process, even in a B2B setting, customers buy emotionally, and they're excited to buy, even if it's a very boring product, they're like excited about the possibilities that this thing is going to bring to them. At least, they're going to get better performance, or they're going to be able to hit their goals. But bottom line is they want to achieve their goals. The salesperson sold them on the fact that this is going to help them achieve their goals.
Right.
They come into onboarding, and now it's let's do this, let's get the product stood up. Let's go through some configuration and import some data and do some, it's like, oh man, that's not what I signed up for, right? So that's why I call it the functional trough of sadness, because it's always just based in the functional aspect of the product. So, the secret to getting people through that is you keep talking about their goals, the things that the salespeople talked about, and you take this normalized process that all customers have to go through, you make it about them, you keep them focused, their eyes on the prize past the onboarding process. Like, okay, we have to go through this so that we can get you to start doing these things that are going to help you achieve your goal. And, it makes the customer feel like this is something that's special for me, even if it's the exact same process that every other customer goes through. And it's amazing how just understanding the fact that, at least right now, we sell to humans, and humans are working in the companies. So we need to kind of understand, how humans operate. That's been one of my other sort of, just from an evolution standpoint. I've spent a lot of time. I like to say I'm not a classically trained psychologist or anything, but I've spent a lot of time studying how humans behave, because it turns out if you can have a little insight into that, it helps get them to do the things we need them to do to be successful. Right. And so, to your point, you might have in one company, you might have several different personas, or just people. I like to just talk about it, several different people that you're going to be working with, because it's good to be reminded that they're actual humans, and they have their overall, they have the goals and the motivation for the business, of course, but in larger companies, they have their own motivation for themselves in their role. And if we can understand that and sort of play to that, it's amazing what you can accomplish and what you can get them to do. That otherwise they might push back on if we didn't understand that, even though ultimately this is about, it's like, why are you pushing back on things that are going to make you successful? But people are interesting, and sometimes they get in their own way, as I like to say. So,
well, and it also depends on where, it's like, as you think about value, because SaaS, brings this capability where, you're whatever the margins are, 80 points, 90 points of margin. It's so, the value and the cost to operate are so different. And so it really forces you to think like, okay, what degree of importance, like, this is going to help this customer XYZ. And, but in the scope of all of the things that this customer has to do, is the cost like sort of right sized for their need? Because you can be selling like the same exact thing to three different people, but their needs are just wild. The relative importance of this thing just changes. And so for us, that was what was general information security out to anyone in the world who wanted to be secure might have been, at the time, $500 a month, where for a bank who needed to demonstrate regulatory compliance, with all of these evolving standards, it was thousands of dollars. And it's like, same stuff, it's a very, very similar stuff. And, but very, very different value to them, and therefore different types of touch and different types of so there were cost dimensions to that. But it's like, if you mess that up and you pretend that your thing is more important to them than they think that your thing is, then it goes sideways quick.
Right. Absolutely. I think I try to remind people that, especially in the early stages of a customer lifecycle, like, we're not necessarily the center of their universe. And depending upon what your product is, you may never be. And that's okay. Like, you have to understand where you fit, and also understand that, like, you're working with this product, or you built this product, or, whatever your relationship with it is. So you see it. It is the most important thing to you. Right.
But, your baby.
Right. But it's not necessarily that way with the customer. And that's okay. So you just have to understand where these things fit, and that's a challenge that I see a lot. I also see there's this whole movement in SaaS around product-led growth, which is really what we just used to call self-service. And, so most of the stuff in there is really just things we were talking about a long time ago around free trial optimization, getting, the customer to do things on their own. But, even there you have very successful PLG, product-led growth companies that, like Atlassian, or Slack, or right. These big companies, AHA, I think, just recently said that they, bootstrapped to $1 billion. I don't know, something like that, or $100 million in revenue. And this is all product led, but the secret is that it's not. It's not product led. The misconception there is we can just build this product, and the product will be so good that it'll just, people will come in and they'll be like compelled to use it. Now, you do see things like, let's say ChatGPT.
Yeah.
That is so revolutionary and also just super easy to use. But, like people are gonna just go in and use it, and there's never gonna be a human interaction required for most customers. And they go, see, look, you don't need people. Well,
right.
Look, if you're building an AI that may or may not take over the world, cool. Maybe this applies to you. But for most products, you might need some assistance. And in the PLG world, there's something called Sales Assist, which is, as you can imagine, just people that sort of assist with helping customers buy stuff. We just don't call them salespeople. Often they're mislabeled as customer success managers. But they're there to, if a customer needs a human interaction to help them make a buying decision, or if they need more information, or if they need a demo. So even in these, my point is, even in these really successful product-led growth companies, it still comes down to, humans behind the scenes and/or humans working directly with the customers to get them to buy stuff, which I just think is kind of funny. But it's also it's bad for founders who are like, I can just build a product and I'm good, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, it's because ultimately these things need to fit into an organization, and usually they're displacing something, and so how does that displacement occur? We had that situation with compliance officers where we say, hey, here's this thing, it's really easy to use, just hit this button, and it's like, well, what about the old way? And so they literally needed to go through this like faux funeral where we'd put the old way to bed and we'd say the new way, and you had to map the two together so that they could see, I can officially let go of this because I have this, and they could move through that cognitive process. Yeah. Because, and I forgot what it was, Harvard Business Review or something. It's like to this day, how much internal business process is transmitted via oral tradition. Yeah. And the answer is still most.
It's the pot roast story. Do you recall that? No. The old, so there's a story about there's a family's making dinner and they have a pot roast, and the dad cuts the ends off the pot roast and puts it in the pan and puts it in the oven, and his partner says, why'd you cut the ends off then? Oh, that's just, I don't know. That's how I was taught. That's how my dad did it. So they while the pot roast is cooking, they call the dad and say, hey, why we cut the ends off the pot roast? Is there a reason? Says, oh, that's how your grandma did it. Okay. So they call the grandma. Hey, why we just made a pot roast, we cut the ends off of it, realized that that's we're not really sure why we do that. Dad said you used to do that. What was the reason? Oh, well, I had a really small pot. So that's, I had to.
Yeah.
And here we are, generations down the road, still doing this thing because it was a workaround.
Right.
How many of your business processes today are because you just had a small pot?
Yeah. No, the reasons that we produce tears are because our eyes need moisture to work because we used to be aquatic.
Right, there we go.
So it's literally part of
Yeah,
everything.
I
Well,
like that.
Lincoln, one of the the thing that sort of got me to think about you and this journey with customer success was that we at Storyhub are helping e-commerce brands drive more repeat customers, more loyal customers, more best customers, and ultimately that's in a world where SaaS has the benefit really of being more durable in many ways because it's sold by subscription and it's inserted into a business process, and therefore you have recurrence and but imagine selling shoes and oh, by the way, once they buy a pair of Thursday boots or whatever, they're going to have an Instagram feed, TikTok feed full of every other product that is virtually indistinguishable.
Right.
And so this idea of sort of passing the learnings of what we all went through for a decade, figuring out customer success, where you have to figure out the relationship that people want, and the more you can refine that notion of what are the relationships that people will have with brand X, Y, or Z. There are people who are parents, there are people who are young professionals, there are people who are people are in different life stages, and therefore they're going to have different relationships with brands.
Totally.
And so I think that e-commerce was shoved a decade ahead with COVID, and I'm like, I bet that decade would have led to the learnings that we had in SaaS organically. And so I think there's some real valuable transference there in terms of that, because right now so much of e-commerce optimization is really it's more like optimizing your Tinder profile. It's just like what's gonna get you the best return on ad spend instead of what's going to build durable relationships.
Right.
And those are two different things. And to your point earlier about sales is important. Getting those
absolutely.
first timers off the sidelines and into the brand, hugely important. But keeping them is its own discipline.
Absolutely. And I think we need to. So I've been built my latest soapbox has been on this idea of decoupling revenue generation from sales. So just this, I think it's a mindset shift that we need to make, which is sales is, so new business sales, talking about SaaS, and we'll talk about e-commerce in just a second, but in SaaS, we have the new business salespeople that go after people with whom we do not already have a commercial relationship. And we need to decouple this idea of revenue generation from that, because we can generate a lot of revenue in other ways from our existing customers that have nothing to do with new business sales. In fact, we shouldn't be applying those same tactics and techniques and mindsets that are required to pull new customers out of thin air. We shouldn't be applying that to our existing customers. That's just unnecessary. Right. And so, that's kind of been my latest rant, because I think that's a mindset shift that will lead to exponential growth and all of that. But in terms of e-commerce, I think we need to decouple what I mean by that is separate this idea of, okay, we absolutely need new customers. We have to have new customer acquisition, whatever channel that comes through, that's required. But just as required, I can't say one is more important than the other, because we do need new customers. But I will tell you, if you focus on growth within your existing customer base, getting those people who bought from you once to buy from you over and over, you could in theory turn off new customer acquisition and not just continue to exist, but continue to grow.
Yeah.
Think about that.
When we do analysis on these guys, on e-commerce brands, their best customer cohort, those who are reliable loyalists, they'll be 5, 7, 8, 10 times, 12 times higher LTV, CLV, customer lifetime value.
Yeah.
So they're just wildly performant. And then, oh, by the way, the one and done crowd are underwater. So like, if your only strategy was to get half as many new customers, but have them convert to best customers at twice the rate.
Yep.
I mean, the profitability impact would be crazy.
For sure. I mean, but that requires this mindset shift. If all you are focused on is, I have to just get new people in the door, then that's where you're going to focus, and you're going to not spend the time and effort and energy and resources or whatever's necessary to get those customers to buy from you again. So yeah, I mean, look, if I can get a customer to come in and buy from me 2 or 3 times and do that, relatively quickly, how much more can I spend to acquire them? I can outspend my competitor. Right. So, now customer acquisition cost it can be much higher because the payback period for that, in SaaS, maybe we're good paying that back in a couple of years, but usually in smaller revenue deals, transactional deals, we want to pay that back, pretty quick. So, if we can do that, that's great. And if we can increase the spend when they do buy, even better, right? Having some sort of ascension path and upsell. And I think, one of the things that just is missed by a lot of transactional businesses, e-commerce or otherwise, is having a clear understanding when the customer would need to buy again.
You mean not every day? You're not texting me every day with another discount code?
Right. And if I can understand, so I have we use a special shampoo. I have never told them how often I wash my hair, or I've never given them any details like that, but somehow they know just about when that bottle is not quite empty, but is getting close.
Yeah.
And I get an email.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, I need to buy this. Now, they could also offer a subscription. I might not do that. Some people will, don't want a subscription, but this is basically that, right? They're coming in saying, based on the size of the bottle you got, based on the average number of times somebody washes their hair,
right.
Boom.
Right.
And that happens with my espresso. My beans start getting low. I get that email.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh man, how do they know me so well, right? No, I think it's just a very simple math problem. But the fact is, they understand how important that is. And so, I can tell you right now, the reason I continue to buy from this one espresso place is because they do that. I bought from somebody else and it was like one and done, and I never heard from them again.
Right.
I will also tell you, to your point about texting every day, there are companies that I bought from. I bought some dumbbells to work out with from Academy, and I get 7 emails from them every single day. Right. And that they just go through the purge, delete. I'm not saying I wouldn't ever do business with Academy again. I'm just saying I'm probably not going to need dumbbells every day, and I certainly don't need all those emails. But what if they came back to me? What if they figured out that somebody with my demographic makeup, I'm sure they could infer some of that, or they could have asked for some information for my profile or whatever, and they figure out, okay, this is the person's age, this is maybe how frequently they work out or whatever. They could come back and say, basically, you should be getting stronger. You need another set of dumbbells, right? And they do that like 3 or 4 months later,
right?
About the time that I'm actually feeling like I need new dumbbells. I think that would have worked well,
right?
Because I know that around at some point I had to buy some more, and I sort of shopped around, right? But if I'd gotten that email from them,
right,
I would have ordered it right then. So
yeah.
Little things like
that. Shout out for the coffee brand who gets their timing right. Do you want to share?
Whole Latte Love.
Whole Latte Love. Okay.
Yeah. They've been fantastic, and I mean they're just what are they doing? Just a little bit extra.
Yeah.
And the lifetime value, I mean, huge. And I I don't know what, I don't remember what my acquisition channel was, but it may have been an ad, it may have just been Google. But I'm assuming I'm a quite a profitable customer for them. Right. And that's just something that, again, it doesn't take much to do that, but it takes a mindset shift of not just getting the customer in, but what can we do to keep them buying more? And that's just something simple there. And then, like you talked about, building a story and a brand and all of that stuff around it, getting people emotionally invested. That's a whole different story that, and that's super important. But just a little tactical thing is when would they need to buy next? And let's just get ahead of that.
Right. Yeah, because you're trying to get that, that right sizing the relationship, because that was, one of the motivators, and this exact experience is what we spend a lot of time here talking about, because like, what is the relationship that I want to have with this brand in such a way that I feel like, okay, they know me. Like, and I think we so many folks have chased this I had this quixotic chase with the perfect one-to-one relationship, and the reality is that it doesn't need to be that. Like, it just figure out which one of the 6 personas, 12 personas, like some it's not a big number, but get it right. Know how often I wash my hair, I drink my coffee. Am I a 3-cup a day guy? Therefore the beans go this way. I just do the espresso in the morning, and then my other coffee's at work. So I have it divide and conquer, and that's and just get that right, and I will feel like you hear me.
And I talk about customers feeling like they get their appropriate experience, so they feel successful. And I can almost picture like data-driven people going, talking about feelings. Yeah, because we're talking about humans, and humans have emotions, and they have emotional connections to things. The interesting thing is, this can all be broken down into things that just need to happen. And if these things happen, those feelings are going to happen. Right. So it still can be quantifiable and like data driven and all of that stuff. It's just what we're trying to do with that is invoke some sort of emotional response with our customer. And the more you can do that, the more you're going to build that loyalty, and you're going to build those repeat customers. You're going to drive customer lifetime value and all the things that we want from that. Or you can say, you know what, I just have the best coffee beans out there, and I'm going to put them out there, and when they need them, they'll come find them. And it's just not how it works. Yeah.
No, it's a field of dreams.
Totally.
Absolutely. Well, Lincoln, this has been the fabulous conversation that I had hoped for, and awesome. Your end point is these are human beings. AI may do many things. It's not going to buy your stuff,
right?
Like that.
At least not yet.
Like AI solving our major problems. Like, no, not really. Like, do human beings need to think less or more?
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah. That's a discussion for a whole another day.
Indeed. But thank you so much for taking the time, Lincoln, and let everyone know where they can find you.
I'm on Twitter at Lincoln Murphy. Or on Instagram at Lincoln Murphy, or you can find me on LinkedIn, where I share a lot of stuff on customer success and growth.
Got it.
Yeah.
And have you ever been engaged by a B2C brand?
I have. I've done some work, and it's always very interesting because we do tend to focus more on the human, and usually when I do that, then I get to bring that back to the B2B brands that I work with, just as a fresh reminder of, like, just you guys realize that we're selling even this really advanced software. We're selling this to people. So,
but a company's buying it. Yeah, no, not so much.
What are companies made of?
Absolutely.
That's the thing.
Absolutely. Well, great. Well, thank you again, Lincoln, and I look forward to catching up again and keeping up with you on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Take care.
Great. Thanks.